Welcome to GTM Confessions, where we share what it takes to be a go-to-market professional today, because it is freaking hard and it's far from the glamorous picture that social media often paints. Consider this show your weekly go-to-market therapy session. I'm your host, Stephanie Cox. I have more than 20 years of experience and I've done almost everything go-to-market related in my career. In this episode, I chat with Wes, founder and CEO at ProductLed, about what it takes to be successful with a product-led strategy, common misconceptions about PLG, transitioning from sales-led to product-led, and so much more. Thanks for coming on the show, Wes. I'm so excited to talk to you about all things product-led today.
Yes, me too. My favorite topic.
So maybe we'll start there. How would you best define product-led growth?
Yeah, I honestly think it's just using your product to acquire, engage, and monetize users. So it could be as simple as cologne or perfume. You try it on, you see if you like it, and then you can buy it. Make an educated decision based on that. But essentially, you provide value first, you serve before you sell. I think that sums it up in a quite quick way.
Perfect. I think it's important to level set with that because I've heard so many other people talk about product-led growth and they all have different interpretations of it slightly. And I think just having the same kind of foundational understanding is really important for the rest of our conversation. So a lot of companies have seen super success stories. I think Slack was a big one that was very successful with product-led growth. And there have been lots of other companies that have been just as successful, but maybe not talked about as much. And then some that have tried it and maybe not been as successful for a wide variety of reasons. Have you seen any commonalities between companies that are successful at implementing PLG versus those that tend to struggle?
Tons. And so back 5 years ago, I was writing the book, Product-Led Growth, How to Build a Product That Sells Itself. And that one was hey, this is all about the book, or not the book, but PLG in general. Is it right for you or not? And you were a part of one of our earlier programs as well. Mm-hmm. And so you got to see, okay, we were talking all about product-led growth, how to do it. And we got to this point where we had about 324 customers. And I was asking myself the exact same question you just asked me. What separates the companies that actually see success with PLG versus the ones that don't? And I didn't really honestly have a good answer. I was we help so many people, but I can't quite predict which ones are going to see breakout success and which ones weren't. And so I just started interviewing, going through every single one of those customers, talking to the founder or the person who actually took the program, went through it. And what actually came out of that was super fascinating. So at that time, our ideal customer was a senior product leader. And then we had about 80% of our audience was within that bucket. And then 20% was founders. And so when I started going through and seeing, which ones were really, really successful versus which ones had mediocre success or just not successful at all, the 20% of founders represented 80% of the results. I was that's nuts. And so it made it easier to kind of dig more into those founders, because then I started asking them even more details. So you went through the same program, but tell me, what else did you do? What did you do differently when it came to implementing PLG? And I kept doing it again and again with these founders. And what came out of it was wow, okay, they're not just thinking about PLG as a product thing. This is their company, go-to-market motion, complete installation of PLG. It's not this let's slap on a little PLG product to our big sales-led business and boom, it doesn't work. It was, this is our DNA. This is our company. And out of that, I decided to write the product-led playbook to kind of distill what are those 9 core pieces that they were doing, because we had been teaching about 4 or 5 of them. And then I was oh, there's these other 4 that really help you build that product-led organization that makes it really sticky so that there is no distinction. Is this a product-led business or not? It's just baked into the DNA. We do PLG.
Do you think part of it being called product-led is part of the challenge where people think it's a product initiative and not a go-to-market initiative? Because I think that was really interesting when you just said that. I was it's product-led is your go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, it 100% is like part of the problem because then it gets labeled as a product thing. I mean, go figure. It's called product, so you would naturally assume, okay, the VP of product is a little high strung. They want to like take lead. It's like not quite, but yeah, the product is definitely more important in that kind of company. So fair. But it is a go-to-market motion, absolutely. And that's actually been my bane of my existence the past couple years is trying to educate people that it's not just a product thing. It's actually your go-to-market motion.
So what other misconceptions do people have about PLG besides that it's not just a product initiative?
Oh, it's my favorite one is it's just a free trial. That's all it is. You just have this little free motion and there you are. You are product led. And I can't tell you how many free trials I've signed up for. Usually it's free trials, which is interesting, but that have like zero product ledness to them. It's like, yeah, it's free-ish, but like as soon as I fill out that form, I'm getting hounded by sales. There's no clear value. I don't even have access to enough free stuff to do anything useful. I could barely click around before getting like the upgrade CTA. So you can have a free trial and still be very sales-led.
Well, I like to call those like they're just like pretty like different forms because we all have like the request a demo form. And then I feel like the next iteration sometimes is, well, we'll give you a free trial. I mean, it doesn't really do anything and won't help you evaluate whether or not the product will work for you. But we use the word free trial instead of demo request. But the output is still the same. We want you to talk to sales.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I would add to it, and I know having went from, like a sales-led organization and transitioning into a product-led organization, and which we'll talk more about in a second. But I think I had the misconception that if you build it, they will come, right? Totally. If you put like a freemium offering on your site, people will come and you'll convert a percentage of them. It will happen automatically. And I think the reality of that was shocking and hard. And I think you were one of the people, like we were really struggling, we were getting a lot of people to come through it, but we weren't seeing a ton of conversion right away. And I remember asking this question years ago, like what the average conversion rate at the time that you were seeing for like best in class PLG versions was. And it was way lower than I could have ever imagined because in my head, I was thinking like, oh, well, best in class, like SaaS win rates for like a sales led motion. It has to be very similar. It is not. It is not.
Yeah, very different. And I mean, you could really boost your product-led metrics if you have like, let's say even an opt-out free trial where you require a credit card, yet it's still like, well, you are saying no to like 99% of people that just don't care enough to do that. So you usually make a lot less money anyways, but you could have higher close rates, upgrade rates, whatever. Yeah.
So with some of these misconceptions that we've talked about, how do you help combat them when you're trying to start a product-led initiative at a company to kind of help level set people on what to expect? Because unless they've worked at an organization that's had this before, oftentimes they're comparing it to sales-led motions, or they have these misconceptions based on what they've read or seen that is typically only like the success stories and not necessarily like the hard work it takes to get there.
Yep. So the very first thing like we go through with companies is your strategy. So what does that look like for a company level strategy? How or is PLG even really core to how you're going to win? So I'll give you an example. I was recently interviewing David, who runs submagic.co. They make it like really easy to create like captions and really, if you think of like TikTok videos or like anything with like all those captions and graphics, they make that wildly easy. And so I was talking to him. I'm like, hey, like, what is your strategy to win? He's like, it really is these three things. It's like 3 clicks to value, and we're going to win with distribution, and we're going to have 10-star customer support. And so each of those 3 things are their moats of how they're going to win. And that's actually their only 3 teams in the whole business. Wow. And so when it comes to where does PLG fit into this business? Well, okay, how are you going to do 3 clicks to value without an amazing self-serve motion? Like, you have to just have that self-serve capability where now it's not just uploading a video, but it's adding the caption. All that stuff has to be really simple for somebody to accomplish that. And if you think of Canva or something like that too, it's like, how are you going to make it easy so you can democratize design for anyone? It's like, well, I can't see any remote possibility that that's going to be a sales-led motion. And so it has to be a high level of conviction, because you're going to need a high level of commitment to make this work. And so I always start with the first kind of principles of, what is your strategy? How are you going to win? How are you going to stand out in your given market? And really not just be a mediocre player, but become the obvious choice in one market for one ideal target market. And you can expand that obviously with horizontal applications and everything, but I truly believe early days, you got to understand who is that one person where you're going to become the obvious choice, and there is no one else who could ever do it as best as you do in that space.
Oh, I love that you said that. It also made me think of, there's like a big difference that I think is a struggle sometimes for companies, is when you think about sales led, you think about who the buyer is, not who the user is. With product led, it's 100% of who the user is. And that's like, as you were just talking, I loved how he's organized the company around like those 3 kind of buckets, because it's very user centric. It's about like 3 clicks to value for the user, not for the person whose budget line item it comes out, that's 2 levels above, that's never going to log in. And I think it's a big distinction that sometimes companies miss when they're thinking about building this way.
Yeah, because like, I'm happy you mentioned that, because that is literally the second out of 9 things like that you got to go through to understand. It's like, what were these companies doing different and better than the other alternatives? And that is really, they understand their user better than anyone else in the market.
So we've talked a little bit about this, about sales led or product led. I would love to get your perspective on, I've done it. It's hard. I'm sure it's not as hard for everyone. I'm sure some people it's easier, but it was hard for us. How do you think about, like, if a company should transition from sales led to product led? And is there a hybrid of the two that can exist? Or does it really need to be one or the other from your perspective and what you've seen?
Yeah, it really comes back down to, well, what is the point of this product-led motion? So I'll give you an example of one of our clients. So they are a multi-billion-dollar plus company. They were fantastic at sales, actually. And their whole use case of PLG is the most hilarious one, but it really makes sense. So they have, like, out of 40,000 plus signups per month, 20,000 of them are 0 to 9 employees. So that's distracting a lot of their sales reps. 20,000 plus leads. They're like, wow, wouldn't it be great if, we could do something self-serve for those people, so we could actually go up market and continue, getting more humongous clients and customers for us. So that's exactly their use case. It's like, we want to have self-serve for the early stage companies so we can still serve them and be competitive in that space, so that when they grow, they're already using our product. So that's like one use case of, like, where does it make sense? We're sales led, but we want this PLG thing. That's very rare, though. A lot of times it's going to be more hybrid, where it's like, okay, we have, this existing sales led product, and we want to kind of broaden out, help more people go through this. And so when I was working at Vidyard, I was exactly it. There was like a video marketing analytics solution, and I was solving like a very intermediate problem that not a ton of companies truly would face, where they're like, I really want to know, Stephanie, how much percentage of that video did you watch on our marketing site? And there's only so many companies that really, really care about that level of marketing analytics. But you know what? Salespeople within that company, they would love to know, like, did you watch the video of that proposal I sent you or not? And like, did you like leave at 20% or not? And so the beginner problem was really simple. It was, I need to create a video and I need to easily send it to somebody. And then I can see the analytics. So it was a micro use case that was a lot more common, a lot more frequent, and people could easily do that with the Chrome extension. And so that was our free product. And then once you started creating all these videos, your entire team within the company was creating more videos. And then you would then care more about, well, we're doing this cool thing in sales. Maybe marketing would like to do that as well. So you'd expand. And so that's really where you have to think about, what is the vision for your company? How does this tie into it? Because you will sometimes have a product or a feature already built in a sales-led company that is going to solve some of those beginner problems that are a lot more frequent, have a faster time to value, and that will help you expand your total addressable market. Other times you're like, in Vidyard's case, we got to build it because we're not solving that gap. And we actually tried to do a free trial without solving that beginner problem. And surprise, surprise, it doesn't work because it's a very big cold start. You got to go from like 0 to 100 pretty quick. It's like, do you have that video? Do you want to upload it to your marketing site? Do you want to connect it with your Marketo or whatever you're using for email marketing? And it was like a really big ask for people.
For to try something out for free to see if it might work for you.
Totally. Yeah, it has to be easy to get started.
Well, I did not know that you did that Vidyard, because it's funny. I became a Vidyard customer in 2017.
Yes.
And
nice.
I remember that I had already looked at a couple of solutions. I talked to a couple other, marketing leaders at the time. And I get on the phone with the salesperson and they're like trying to go through the sales process. I'm like, can you just tell me how much it costs? And they're like, well, I was like, you don't understand. Like, I'm going to buy, I just need to see if it fits within my, how much does it cost? And they're like, well, we can do it. I don't need to see a demo. How much does it cost? And can you send me a DocuSign? Like, it was just, it was weird but I think it's common. I think, in those situations, which are so prevalent today, there's so many times where I want to check out a solution at 10 p.m. at night. I don't want to talk to sales. I want to see if it works for me. I've heard someone else talk about it. I want to kind of check it out. And I wish that Vidyard had that back in 2017, because I would have bought it probably at 10 p.m. at night, put my company credit card in, and then went off to the races. Because that's what I do now, is how I think about stuff.
And you mentioned that example too, because you were asking me previously about what are some of the transitions you have to make when it goes from sales-led to product-led. And the piece you mentioned there that is relevant is there's actually core values too that do have to change, that you have to be okay with, because like 2017 Vidyard, you get trained with top sales leaders that are like, don't say the price, don't say that, you're getting fired if you say the price. No. But there is actually a ton of sales training that's like, you got to own the conversation, you got to do this, you got to save it for the closer at the end, the account exec, and don't do that. So they were doing everything they thought was right, but it was like the transparency wasn't there. And as a buyer, now that there's looms, there's a ton of different options. It's like, well, which one do you feel more comfortable doing? Is it the one you got to jump through hoops? You're like, hey, I'm trying to buy it. I can't even buy it. Or is it the one that's transparent? It's easy to use. And so there's a lot of different capabilities that need to support that, like good pricing. And that's like another one of those node components that you got to rehaul and go through to really adjust it for the modern buyer, who is that user.
Well, and I love that you mentioned pricing, because I think sometimes when you think about going sales-led to product-led, you're like, oh, well, we'll just take our pricing and we'll just make it product-led. And it at least for us, it doesn't work that way, because it's easy, especially when we had consumption-based pricing. That was really easy to explain when I could get you on a call and talk to you. It is really hard to narrow that down and make it crystal clear on a website landing page that someone's looking at 10 p.m. at night. Or as an upgrade CTA when they don't, maybe understand. And so I think there's a lot back to the culture and the overall business strategy that you have to kind of almost rethink in a new lens to make product-led part of the DNA of the business. Totally.
Yeah, that's why I always still go back to that strategy, because even the core values you choose should impact it. Like if product-led, we have a lot of implementers that will help you implement PLG for your business, but each of the core values is very relevant to how are they going to succeed. Like simplicity, if you really leave the client confused, it's probably not going to be a good fit long term. Energy, if your energy is really low and dry and boring, nobody really wants to work with you. And so it's everything has to be intentional when you create and design that product-led business. And it doesn't have to be product-led with that specific approach, but it's helpful to think about it in that context.
So when you think about companies that are doing this type of transition, how do they know that they're ready for it or that they should try it or that their company culture is a good fit for it?
Yeah, so the biggest piece is if you're thinking about like, are we ready for this? What does this look like? You could look at it from the product perspective, like, hey, is our product even ready remotely, like on the readiness scale of this could actually work? The other part is strategically, does this really align with where we want to go? Like if you see there's a really big opportunity, untapped market where like, okay, we need to go forward with this. That's usually with a lot of clients we talk to, that's something where they're like, okay, I'm really seeing this option that we could really capitalize on. But then the other big thing I'm seeing again and again is, especially in the SaaS space, everything's getting commoditized way faster than it ever would have. Like you think of even with like developer tools like Cursor, it's like any average dev becomes a 10x dev. And now it's way easier to develop anything. And so what is your competitive advantage? What are the moats you're going to build? And at the end of the day, what do modern buyers want to have? They want the easiest solution to use. They just want to get, like if they could click a button and get value, that's all they want. They don't even necessarily want to see your interface, which is crazy. Like we're going to see a lot more tools like that, which is just like faceless, frontless apps that just connect with everything and you get the outcome done with a couple of prompts. And so that's what people want. That's where we're going towards. So it's like, how can we get them to the value as fast as possible? So those are some of the questions I would at least ask of like, is your product ready for this? Is the strategy aligned with where you want to go? And truly, is this going to be a core part of how you are going to build a moat around your business that's going to make you very hard to copy? Because just doing what you do today, it's going to be easy to copy. But what will make you very, very hard to copy? That's the fun question I would like to go through.
Well, one of the things that you just said around is your product ready? Do people ever tell you yes? Like, are they ever like, yes, our product's ready. We have auto provisioning. And then they don't realize it's not ready for someone to use it with no knowledge of you and never talking to you before. Like, is there a huge misconception there?
Well, yeah, there is that part. Like usually they're a lot more like, yeah, I think it's ready. We're good. And, but then what we realize is, oh, okay. And this is very, very common. It's like the capabilities you need, like each of those 9 pieces we are going to go through, like they're a capability, like your strategy. Do you have a really locked down strategy? Understanding the user, do you really understand who that user is? Like your pricing as well. Like, is that really great self-serve pricing where, you know, the first plan, it's not too much of a jump for people to get in, but you can still expand into these amazing, humongous contracts with a product-led motion. Can you do that because you've identified your value metrics and stuff? And so that's the part where we come in and we're like, oh, I love this problem. It's easy. We can help you like sort out what the gaps are. And it's kind of like a puzzle for us. But that's really the piece where those capabilities in each of those 9 areas is super important to lock down.
What are the most common challenges that you see companies facing with this transition, besides some of the ones we've just talked about? Is there anything else that you would say tends to cause stumbling roadblocks?
Yeah. So understanding what to give away for free, huge. Most people guess, and you were going to ask me the GTM confession. So mine right now is picking, just a 14-day free trial because it's like that's what the competitors had. And, you do it and you're like, oh, I'm product led. Yay, I did it. And then you're like, oh, it's not working. Why is it not working? It's because it wasn't, 1, intentional, and 2, it didn't actually have any sort of transformation within it. There's no like, oh yeah, that's why I use this product versus this one, even though they're in the same market. There's no unique value add. There's no core, like before and after I used Lumavate, I can do this now. And so you really want to have that core outcome unlocked. So that's like the first one, is just really getting clear on what you're giving away for free. So it's not just random stuff, because if you just give away random stuff, it won't work. The second piece is probably the hardest, and this is actually why Ramley John wrote the book Product-Led Onboarding, because we realized onboarding is very hard. And as a product-led company, if you can't deliver value first, like it's not going to work. And you need to develop a core strength regarding how do you onboard users, and not just like for your basic, product-led company. There's usually just like one kind of user you're going to have to go through and onboard. But as we know, with a lot of our clients, like I'll take one of our time tracking solutions we were working with. It's like, okay, you onboard the person who's like the admin or the CEO, and then boom, you got to onboard the entire company. And so there's a whole nother level there of like, okay, now I got to build an onboarding flow for them and everything. And so that's a core humongous piece of the problem that you do have to solve. The third most common one is pricing, but we kind of talked a bit about that. And so I would say the next one is really, we notice like even mature product-led companies have very immature product data stacks. So they just aren't tracking the right stuff. They're tracking too many things. They don't really know what is the core bottleneck in their business at all times. And you just think like, imagine running your business not knowing like where the biggest bottleneck is. It sounds silly, but like the amount of companies that just don't know that. And they're 3, 5, 10 million ARR. You're like, if we just did this one thing, we could double your business in a few years, and that would be fantastic. And you wouldn't have to work any harder. You just work smarter at the end of the day, focus on the core bottleneck. And so like the metrics we track is like, okay, number of unique users to your website, signups, number of people get set up successfully, number of people get a first strike, so some sort of value in your product, number of people get a key usage indicator, then they upgrade, then they actually expand. Like it's not rocket science metrics, but it's just understanding out of those, where are you losing the majority of the people and where could we provide the biggest impact? And then let's do experiments based on that.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because I know when we were going through it, we had a couple of those stumbling blocks, one of which you so graciously pointed out to us. When we first went from sales-led to product-led, one of the things that we still had two-factor authentication. We primarily sold at the time into upper mid-market enterprise, and they care about those things. Well, when you go product-led, you open yourself up to all kinds of other people who are not necessarily used to using like the Google Authenticator app. Mm-hmm. And so when you require that, they would get stuck. And I remember it was after we had signed up for, when I had signed up for product-led and was going through some of the courses, like literally like within like 48 hours, you've filmed a video and sent it to me of going through our product-led process and all of these things that we should be doing. And it was fascinating. It helped me get two-factor authentication turned off pretty quickly after that, which I appreciated, which caused one bottleneck to go away. But one of the things that was fascinating for me is sometimes the bottlenecks that you think exist in the onboarding process and like in the product itself are not what are actual bottlenecks for users, and things that you've never seen, have like other users through a sales-led motion that get kind of like onboarded with the customer success team and that have been hearing your nomenclature for weeks or months during the sales process become bottlenecks for product-led users who are just like, this doesn't make sense to me. I wouldn't do this. Or they start doing things in very different ways. And to me, that was like really eye-opening, is I now had to think about not just what my users across, like both motions would experience, but also how just even how they hear about us and how they come to us puts a different spin on what is easy for them or what seems simple, even if no one's had a problem with it before. Because we ran into, at the time when I was at Limivate, all of these issues that we had never seen. Or, we used the word publish for like publish a digital experience. And that confused our product-led users and had never confused anyone before that. It was just an interesting, like eye-opening thing that we started having to kind of rethink through the process.
Yeah, and I'm happy you mentioned that too, because like as you're going from more sales-led hands-on to more hands-off to completely hands-off for users to get the value, there is often so much value. Like I love going through the recordings of the people that are helping the users get to value, because you're like scratching your head kind of wondering like, oh, okay, they're mentioning publish in like this context. And then you're like, I see why nobody has had an issue with that before, and how that would be different for people that are the first time going through it. And then there's some of the initial questions they might ask, like, hey, is this your first time publishing a digital experience? It's like, well, actually, maybe we should add that in the onboarding experience to ask them, and then we could educate them based on, if they're an expert or if they're a beginner, we can talk to them based on that level and personalize things. And so, yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that, because every experience is definitely different that way.
Well, and I think it's something when you're having like a sales conversation, you start doing in your mind, like through discovery questions or based on their responses, you tweak your talk track automatically and personalize it to them and their kind of level of understanding of what your product offers. And I don't think we realize oftentimes that you need to do the same thing with the onboarding process for ProductLed, except you have to think through all of those different iterations and create the content and the user experience that does that automatically based on who they are, where they're at in their journey with you, what they know, what kind of experience they're coming in with, etc.
Totally. Yeah, there's a lot more initially guessing, but then mapping it all out. Like, what are the specific like top 3 goals that people have to do? Is it sending an invoice? Is it reviewing your finances? What is that? And then based on that, yeah, you direct them exactly to what they want to accomplish. But that also goes back to, you got to be really clear with like your offer page. What is this product going to do? Because the famous example I always go back to is like, if people sign up for Vidyard, which they think is a video marketing agency, like nothing is going to help that onboarding experience, because they're just lost from day one because they were promised something else and they're not going to get what those options are. And that's a true story. They're like, how do you make my videos? I was like, what did we do wrong?
Can't help you with that, unfortunately. Like, but it's
Exactly.
but then you're also like, why did you think that?
Exactly.
It's the thing to uncover. Okay, so if I am a company and I am getting started with PLG for the first time, whether that's as I'm building it as the foundation of my business because I'm a new founder, what would you say are like the most critical steps to kind of starting that journey and making sure it gets off on the right foot?
Yes. So I always say, like at the very beginning, since it is a go-to-market motion, like don't just go into PLG from like day one, we have 0 customers, let's just make it completely self-serve. I actually think that's a little silly. You could go into it thinking, okay, there's, like I have this with a lot of founders I talk to, there is probably no other way we could service this market without a PLG motion. And you're like, long-term, it's going to be that. That's completely fine. But like get your first 10, 30 customers through founder-led sales. Really just try and understand, okay, what does that look like? And do we have a business to be had here? So product market fit, really important. You can do that in tandem with the PLG motion, but at least get the first 10 to 30 with that founder-led sales motion. Once you get that, then you get to go through those 9 pieces we talked about. First thing is your strategy. How does this tie into how you're going to win? What is the target market you're going to go after? And what are some of those moats you're going to build? It's like, is it going to be the easiest to use solution? Great. If that is, PLG is probably a good fit. And then you got to understand, step 2 is like, who is the ideal user? And what is success look like for them? And what are their biggest challenges across not just like signing up for your product, but also searching for the ideal approach that you're offering? And then what are the problems and challenges with scaling up, experiencing value in your product? And then once you understand all that, then it's your model. That's step 3 is like, what do we give away for free? Now, if you understand that user, like what is a first strike? What is first value? What does that look like? Then it's actually kind of easy. It's like, well, it's that. That's our free model. Give them something that's tangible, showcases the best part of our product so they can see like this is why we use our product and why it's the best. And then make sure they have everything they need to go through it. So that's kind of the first 3 steps. Did you want me to go through the next 3 or?
Yeah, please do. I think that'd be great.
Okay. So the first 3 I just talked about, those are like your foundation elements for your product-led strategy. The next 3 are all about your go-to-market motion. So this is where you got to go through and identify what is your offer that makes your product irresistible. Now, the fun thing here is if you have dialed in your strategy and you got very clear on how you're going to win, then a lot of the times, even if you're not good at product marketing, you can stand out here because like one of our clients, they're called Promotics. They're going up against Eventbrite. They're like, honestly, Eventbrite, like the gorilla in the space, but we are much cheaper than them, and we give you way more marketing tools to actually sell more tickets. Just those two things. They got the same amount of traffic, but they got 40% more signups just because they're really clear on why choose us versus them. And so you got to have that offer locked in. So then, once people know what the promise is, it's all about onboarding. That is step 5, where you got to go through, deliver value as fast as possible. Once you do, then the next logical step is you've got value. Okay, here's our simple pricing. And that's step 6, which is just going through how do we actually convert these free users that have value from the product to customers that can actually expand into really big customers.
So one of the things that you talked a little bit about like we've talked about trials and freemium, how do you decide between which one makes the most sense? Because I do think to some extent companies are like, well, we'll do what are our competitors doing? Or like 14 days sounds great for a free trial. You should be able to make a decision in 14 days or 30, like whatever that hot number is at the time. How do you figure out if a freemium offering or a free trial is best for your business?
Yeah, so the first part in the user component I would always like go back to is like that's the foundation of everything for your model usually, and that is just asking yourself, okay, what is the like big end outcome for this ideal user? Like what's success? What is the main job to be done for them to be? And then I'd break that into like 3 levels. Like if you think of like how you could gamify this, that would be like, what's the beginner level? Very basic. Like if we look at video art as an example, it's fun because videos are easy to understand. So if the big success is the entire organization is using videos and they're using them to make more sales, sell more, and really just even market and everything else. So the entire organization is using videos, that's success. The beginner outcome might just be, all right, let's get people to start using videos and understanding if their videos are resonating. Okay, what do we need to do that? Well, we need a simple Chrome extension, and we need, within 3 clicks or less, we need people to be able to click record and send it to somebody, to prospect, to understand what that looks like when they watch it. We'll update them on, hey, did Stephanie watch 50% or 100% of that video? What does that look like? And so that's your beginner level. Now, as soon as they hit a certain amount of videos or they want to do something else, then it's like, okay, the next step, the intermediate level, is you will probably want to have more people on your team sending videos, not just one person, not just be a lone wolf. So it's like, okay, now you can extend to this to the rest of your team. You can customize your videos, what you're sending, add your company branding as you're now establishing this is not just one person, it's a company that's going through this. And then there's an advanced level. So what is the main outcome there? It's like we want the entire organization to do this. So you need integrations with Marketo, like whatever other tools you're using, and you need to use this on the marketing side. And so that's really where you can start to understand like where are your plans and what are the like kind of unlocks that people can establish at each of those levels. And most companies, they don't think too much about what are each of those levels, and they're just thinking a little more tactically about, oh, like that should be priced, let's do $29 a month because I've heard good reports about that, and that's a sweet spot number. And should we include that feature? I think so. And oh, like I've seen this a ton too, so I'll make fun of it, where it's like, how do we get more users to upgrade? Oh, let's get that feature too, and that one, and that one. And there's no thinking about, well, did the user need to do or use that in order to see the value of your product? And sometimes too, people will just hide their best stuff. And I always am kind of the opposite. I'm like, you know what? You're in a competitive, commoditized space. Wouldn't it be great if people knew why your product was the best in this space? And they're like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. But isn't that risky? It's like, yes, it's about transparency, but if we don't showcase the core value, then people won't have a reason to come back. And that's actually the biggest concern, is that, 60% of users on average don't come back a second time. So that first time user experience has to be seamless, really good, valuable for them to actually want to come back.
One of the things that you've mentioned a couple of times is around how much of the market's getting commoditized. Do you feel like other leaders, like especially CEOs, struggle with like accepting that reality as part of this kind of conversation? Because it does force them to think about transparency in terms of pricing, their product functionality, like their overall go-to-market strategy differently than when they think, the days of value-based selling are still prominent.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it all goes back to like, why is go-to-market right now becoming so important? It's like, it is because it is getting way easier to create any sort of product. And so it is going to have to become a more valuable core skill for anybody, because it's not, 30 years ago in SaaS where it's like, oh, you do that? Fantastic. And like, you're the only one that does that. So you can
never
actually
seen
have
that
a lot
before.
of leverage.
Take all of my money. Yeah. No, I
Totally.
think that's a good point, especially with like just where AI is going and how many companies are going to be able to be created overnight with some of that technology. I think is going to fundamentally shift like the paradigm of how we think about everything. So one of the things that I know that you have talked a lot about in the past is this idea of like a product-led organization and how it's really fundamental to the business. So when you think about creating a true product-led organization, like how does a company, like a CEO, founder, go about doing that and making it inherent DNA?
Cool. I'm glad I didn't finish with the other last three pieces, because yes, now we can. So the first one we already talked about, which is the strategy. So it's like literally PLG will be baked into the company. Now for the third and last like bucket of three items, this one is all about how do you like get everybody involved into just thinking not just about PLG, but your go-to-market motion and really prioritizing this. And so the three components are like the first one's data. So are we tracking the right metrics within the product? Like the 6 metrics I covered before, like your users, your signups, all those, that's what we're looking at every single day. We're going through and seeing how are we tracking on those specific numbers. There should be an owner tied to every single one of those metrics. If it's off track, there should be a plan of attack of, hey, here's how I'm going to put this back on track. If you don't think that person can do it or there's not a good plan of attack, that's an issue you discuss every single week in your weekly accelerator meetings. And so that's the second component there is really just your process. How do you solve problems as a company? And what I've noticed in early stage companies, a lot of times there's no like consistent pulse. It's just whatever the founder's speed is. If they have a great day, it's fast. If not, slow. And so you just want to add a rhythm inside your business. And so the best way, this is not rocket science here, but the best way we've seen is just you have a quarterly strategic alignment meeting where you're going through your strategy, you're reviewing the rest of the 7 components and seeing, okay, where do we stack up on these? Is this still the right strategy? Is this still the right ideal user? Is this still the right model and offer and all those pieces? So you're reviewing everything, seeing if there's any core fundamental things you need to tweak and improve on, and then you just decide, move forward. And so that's super helpful for setting the rhythm for the quarter. And you'll go through, have monthly planning meetings. These are very quick meetings. Like it could be short as a half day. It could be, if it's just 2 people, knock it out in an hour and a half every month. But you're reviewing the month, going through the core metrics, seeing what are the core issues in the business that you need to address, and setting what are your core projects for the week, for the month, that will really help you dial in those metrics and hit the targets that you set at the end of the day. And then you have your weekly accelerator meetings, and that's really where you're going into that scorecard from the data components previously and seeing, okay, this is the core bottleneck. You're deciding what that is, and you're going through and seeing, okay, what are the best ways to solve that? What are the experiments this week we're going to run to solve that? And whoever owns that metric that is off track is basically like the mini CEO. They might not have the like responsibility of the true CEO, but it's like, hey, we all have to support this person because it's holding the entire business back. This is not just their problem, it's everyone's problem. And when you attack it that way, good things happen. Everybody rallies together. You solve the issue way faster because, back to go-to-market life, it's always cross-collaborative. It's like what might be impacted here is also going to impact sales or somebody else down the line. And so solving it together helps a ton. Then the last component, this is last for a reason, especially for product-led companies, is team. Because if you go through the first 8 components, you'll actually solve the majority of problems with your product, not your team. And even if you run into a specific bottleneck like, oh, we don't have enough signups, you're launching experiments to see, okay, let's say Facebook ads or Meta, that works or that takes off. It's like, great, we've seen it, we validated it. Now we can finally unlock a teammate and to do just that. And it's way cheaper, way better when you do it that way, because you're really making sure you're being intentional about who do you add on to the team versus a lot of sales-led companies, back to the culture piece. We have a problem. Who, not how. And in product-led companies, a lot of times it's like, well, we have a bottleneck. How could we solve that the most effective way? And a lot of times your product can do a ton of that heavy lifting.
Well, and one of the things that you mentioned was this idea of experimentation. I feel like that's often something that companies don't understand how critical it is to do on a daily/weekly basis when you are product led, because you do need to test and iterate. And for me, I think that was especially with our engineering and product team, one of the hardest shifts is they're like, you want me to do what? How quickly? You want that fixed tomorrow? And right, because they were used to more of a traditional waterfall method, or we got to agile, and I'm like, yeah, but could we do it fast and dirty? How could we test it out? We're not trying to make it permanent and scalable. I just want to see if this will fix the problem, and then we can build the permanent long-term solution. So are there any, besides that, is there any other functional areas that you've seen struggle with kind of the culture shift that can come along with being a product-led organization?
Yeah, well, that is just one. How fast can we move? What is the pace? Experimentation. The question you asked there of how could we do this is fantastic, because I'm not saying it's possible, but how could we? And then you're really getting
what
them
if?
to think. Yeah. What if I'm crazy, but we could do this in 2 days? What would that have to look like? And so then you open up a lot of different possibilities there. The other part of cultural pieces that have changed, we talked about transparency. The other one, simplicity as well. I do feel like it's super underrated, but a lot of product companies make things easier. They make them more simple. And so how could we allow that to happen? And so it all usually ties back to eventually the strategy and what are the strategic choices we have to make. And I love the book Essentialism for this. The cover of the book is my favorite. There's this little energy bubble that looks like a sun. It's diffusing energy in 10 different directions. 1 inch though in 10 different directions. And then there's one arrow that's 10 inches in one direction. And so that's essentially the mental picture you want to have of your streamlined company. And if you're going to be product led, you have to learn to really say no to a lot of things. You will have customers that come to you and say, oh, you know what, Stephanie, I would love to have this special sauce in your product. And you're like, oh, yes, that would be nice. Does it impact or would it help the majority, the other 80% of users? If no, then okay, we're not going to do it unless it's an experiment. And so that's hard to do at scale because there's so many unique directions you could take it, but it takes a lot of focus, which is underrated. And it's really hard for founders to do that for the long term.
It is. Well, especially, I think it goes back to one of the things you said earlier about really knowing who your ICP is and knowing who your user is, because when you do have, especially with the freemium offering, you do have a lot more people maybe that are outside of that sweet spot for you that can create noise that can be a little distracting. So
totally. That's why if any one of those 9 pieces is not dialed in, locked down, or you're not clear on it, it goes back to we're not streamlined anymore. Even if just one of them, your user's off or something like that, could be chaos.
So last question, what is your biggest go-to-market challenge? Or what is your biggest go-to-market confession?
Yes, this was my first freemium motion, just picking what a competitor has and making it a 14-day free trial. It didn't work because there was no intentionality behind it. So that's my GTM confession.
You've been listening to GTM Confessions. If you love what you've heard, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And don't forget to tell a friend.